Lauren Schoenberg here with Mel Lewis, and we're talking about Gene Krupa
See,
and Ben
but
Pollack.
you young drummers, again, I hope that if I mean, if any of you are listening, that's the other thing. I don't know if you're out there
They're out
listening,
there. I can see them.
but what you just heard is what you're trying to play. This is this is basic drumming.
Yep.
Of the only it's being created at the moment. You're hearing it as it was created at that moment. It wasn't rehearsed for a year in a garage. You know,
Say that again.
that's the whole thing. You know, you shouldn't have see if you really know what you're doing. You shouldn't have to do that, and you shouldn't have to play the same thing every time you play. See, these men were able to create something new every time they played,
That's right.
and not only that, not only able to create, they did it. You know, because they listened and everything was different every time they played a tune. But it didn't matter who was with. Of course, you know, one thing you do, you learn the people you work with, you learn about them, and you get to know their style, so you can anticipate. In fact, you know, the more you play with somebody, that there are always people that are just made for each other, so you can compliment that person. And that's why so-and-so will always sound better with so-and-so playing behind him.
Right.
You know.
Like Lester Young in the Count Basie rhythm section.
Right.
He never played
You know.
better than
No,
than with that.
because they just understood each other so well, you know. And, you know, and that's the way it was. And that's the way it should be, you know. And that's from relationships, you know. So.
All right. Let's hear Ben Pollack. We talked about Ben Pollack a little bit. Again, very lesser-known drummer, gentleman who was first came to fame with the New Orleans Rhythm Kings, a Chicago group, in the early 1920s, and who had quite a reputation as a real fine drummer. We'll hear him in a tune called Room 1411. Supposedly that's the hotel room where the guys from his band were staying and all living in one room because they couldn't afford the rent and sneaking hot dogs under the door.
Those days too.
June 4th, 1928, Jimmy McPartland on cornet, Glenn Miller on trombone, Benny Goodman's heard here on baritone sax and a little bit of clarinet, Fudd Livingston on the tenor, Vic Brightus piano, Dick Morgan guitar, Harry Goodman on the tuba, and Ben Pollack on the drums. And let's remember, this is 1928. You'll hear some nice ride cymbal work and some nice effects here from a very early date for jazz drumming. Ben Pollack, 1928.
was pretty interesting because he played a lot of cymbals,
Yeah.
and he did ride. You called my attention. There it was. He was
He rode
riding on the Chinese cymbal
behind the tenor solo.
behind the tenor solo, and then later on he was he rode out on that thing. And he got away with it too, and he was playing a lot of nice things on 4. Actually, there was a lot of taste in there. He was heavier than I thought.
There was a frantic quality to that
Yeah.
recording. Of course, they were all young. You have to realize.
Well, you could hear everybody sort of rushing, and
Yeah.
see. Don't forget again, he was probably 30 feet away from them.
Right.
All these drummers are pushed back in a corner somewhere, and to keep everybody together is very difficult because a lot of those old timers a lot of them had a tendency to rush. The players. The drummers were always trying to hold it back, But then there was that's probably because in some cases some of the players thought the drummer was dragging because he was so far away, and they were getting the sound from him late. And then the drummer, of course, thinking everybody's running away from him, is trying to hold them back. So he's doing everything he can to keep it from running. It's and this was all created by technology, So the human parts took over, and I know about that because a lot of arguments and scenes in recording studios.
Yeah. We just heard Ben Pollock, Room 1411 from June 4th, 1928. He really was,
I thought there was some very
Yeah.
modern stuff in there.
Yeah.
In fact, I'd say he and Greer had a lot in common about fills and things like that. He played some very nice fills in there.
Yeah.
Some very musical sounds.
Sounds. We'll be getting to Sonny Greer in the second installment of this 3-part History of Jazz Drummer show. Right now we're going to go to our first drummer, I guess, who would really be called a New York drummer because he came to fame in New York and played with the premier big band of the 1920s, and that was Fletcher Henderson's band. The drummer was Joe Kaiser Marshall, known as real name, not to be confused with Joe Marshall, the drummer of nowadays, but I believe his first name was Joseph. But in any case, he was known as Kaiser Marshall, undoubtedly having something to do with the Kaiser, World War I.
Yeah.
Or maybe he liked Kaiser rolls.
No.
And he played in Fletcher Henderson's band all throughout the 1920s, from the very early 20s through about 1930 or so, when Walter Johnson came in the band. And certainly not someone that is talked about, but as I understand, he's the one who invented the hi-hat cymbal. Or
It's
so
possible.
the story goes.
Yeah, I have no idea who invented the hi-hat cymbal.
Or at least who might have bought it to note. We'll hear him in 2 recordings. First, from a very important recording, one of the very first interracial mixed record sessions. It's called Knockin' a Jug, and supposedly the reason it was called Knockin' a Jug was there was a jug there and they all drank it.
Yeah.
Louis Armstrong, Jack Teagarden. The tenor saxophonist is Happy Caldwell. Joe Sullivan on piano, Eddie Lang on guitar, banjo. Eddie Condon was around there somewhere, but most people think he was probably on the floor by that time. He's probably not playing here. And Kaiser Marshall on the drums. Now, oddly enough, the drums are over-recorded here, and that's good, so we get to hear what he was doing. The drums are way up front. I think the engineers must have been drunk, too. It was really just one of those crazy things.
Yeah.
And the guys who were on the session all remember the fact that Louis, they hadn't rehearsed it. They just had to do a blues, and they went into it, and Louis's solo at the end supposedly knocked everyone out. They just couldn't believe what they were hearing. So we'll get to hear Kaiser Marshall in not a real working situation, but in kind of an all-star little late night record session, Knockin' a Jug, and then we'll hear him with the Fletcher Henderson band, to which he came fame, to which brought him to fame. From 1929, a very early Benny Carter arrangement. That's another person who Mel Lewis has recorded with over a period of almost 30 years. And we'll hear Blazin' from May 1929, Benny Carter's arrangement, solos by Bobby Stark and Coleman Hawkins. So Kaiser Marshall in 1929. Kaiser Marshall, 1929 recordings. Louis Armstrong knocking a jug with Tea Garden, Happy Caldwell, and friends. How about let's talk about that one first.
Yeah,
that's the one where he was way up front.
That was he was. In fact, in the beginning, I almost thought it wasn't until later on that I realized he was playing on a drum, because I thought it sounded like he was playing on a newspaper or a magazine at first, because it had a flat sound. Then it opened up, and then when he went to the sticks with the rolls on the rims, and which was nice because he made a change.
Right.
He had nothing to work with except the one drum is actually what it amounts to.
Right.
And he still made a change in sound. That's taste right there.
That's a key component, I guess, of drumming is marking the transitions from one thing to another.
Yeah,
different something.
A different sound. You have to change sounds behind different soloists and behind different things.
We're talking with Mel Lewis at 7:52. You're listening to WKCR FM in New York, 89.9 on your FM dial, coming to you in stereo. And thank you for coming to you in stereo. Kind of split up a little bit on the microphones here, talking about some of the early jazz drummers. How about on the second title? He didn't seem to also have a full
The
drum
second
set.
title, he did not have a full set of drums again. I could tell that also. That he was playing on what they used to call a trap table. He just had a trap table, and actually he confined himself pretty much to a couple of cymbals there.
Yeah.
And this was again the recording industry's problem.
Yeah.
That's why a lot of that went down that way.
Yeah.
Of course, that's why they had banjos and things like that. To try and create as much, and piano player played oompa oompa.
That was a Benny Carter arrangement. It's kind of funny when you think about some of the
Yeah,
Benny
when you
Carter
think-
music that we've played, and then to think that he 1929. That was pretty.
Yeah.
It's a very nice
The
arrangement.
year I was born.
Well, that's how old it is. And that record will be 60 years old this year.
Yeah.
And but one thing I have to say, one thing just to credit Kaiser, and of course the records I've picked are all great drummers. We're not doing a show on the bad drummers, so
No.
so we could A and B them, so you could so folks, all you're hearing tonight are tasteful, great drummers. And believe me, we threw in some records by some untasteful, ungreat drummers. Then you'd appreciate these folks probably even more. But the nice thing about that last tune, because I guess for whatever reason they didn't record the whole drum set, John Kirby's tuba, which was beautiful by the way, really seemed to take up the slack in the rhythm section. But he really had it nice and swinging, though, I thought.
Well, another thing you
the
have to
feel was
understand
nice.
is that
You
these particular drummers, these are the guys that grew up. They were young men then. Some of them were already not so young, but basically they had to learn it on their own.
Yeah, it's very true.
I mean, they didn't have anybody to really listen to except military marching drummers. Jazz was still so young and so new.
I think
And they were the creators.
That's a very important point. That's right. In
Mhm.
1929, let's say Kaiser Marshall was in his late 20s. So when he was 15, 16, those early formative years, that was 1915, 1916. I mean, there were no...
who did he have to listen to?
Yeah, show drummers or, military band drummers.
Yeah, that was it.
There wasn't even really a drum set, I don't think so. Mel, what do you know about the origins of the
Drum
putting
set?
a drum set together? I mean, when they put those component parts.
Do you
know when that
My
happened?
father started playing in 1918, and his first set, he said he didn't have a foot pedal. He had it was a strap that was pulled to play with the bass drum.
With your hand, you mean?
You pulled you pulled it with your foot.
Right.
You pulled it.
Oh, pulled it. Right.
And it created a beater to go against the, but it wasn't a press down. It was like they were just starting to figure out how to. He says, and a lot of the times he played just with the one hand and boom ting.
Right.
And then you boom boom. You had a. It was just a snare drum and a bass drum, and the bass drum. He said he remembers when he got his first foot pedal, which was later on, and I don't think that was even invented until in the very early 20s. The actual foot pedal, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, I could be wrong, but I don't think so.
But up until that point, I guess
Ludwig.
there had been either you played a bass drum with your hands, you know,
Right,
or you
yeah.
played a snare drum.
That was it.
But that thing of coordinating it
Yeah.
all, you know, sitting down and playing
and the New
two drums.
Yeah, the New Orleans bands were all two drummers.
Yeah.
You know, even back in Louis' time when he was a kid, you know.
Right.
You know, it was still two drummers.
A guy playing a bass drum.
A
And,
bass drum, yeah.
and I'll tell you, I've heard some of those recordings of those early bands, and also I got to play the bass drum in my high school marching band. And I'll tell you, you know, you can really swing a band with a big bass drum. And, you know, it's a great feeling. I mean, of course, I'm sitting here across from Mel Lewis, who has swung so many bands.
Believe
but,
me,
But
that's-
just that feeling of boom, boom, boom.
The bass drum is what
Yeah.
swings a band.
Yeah,
And that's why I always, you know, talk about playing the bass drum. Or we do it a different way today, but without that bass drum, there is no swing.
yeah.
And Dizzy Gillespie, he's the one. He told me, you know, the first band he played and only had a bass drummer down in
Chiro, South
Chiro
Carolina.
down there,
Chiro,
yeah.
South Carolina.
and he said that there was the guy that played the bass drum was something else.
Yeah.
And they didn't even have a snare drummer. They
Yeah.
just had the bass drum, but they needed the bass drum. The bass drum, he says, and that was the whole thing.
You know, it's funny when I listen to some really swinging records, or when I feel it's really swinging, I'm listening to something that's swinging. I find myself almost with my right foot tapping. Sometimes I'm almost drawn to tap on 1 and 3.
1 and 3 is where
You know
it's
what
at.
I mean?
1
And then
three
you
is
get
where
that
it's
push
at.
and pull, that
Yeah.
boom. You get that
Yeah.
like that railroad trestle kind of
That push and pull.
push and pull.
Yeah, the 2 and 4 is, of course, you know, that has a, you know, that's saying something with the 2 and the 4, but the 1 and 3 is where it's really at.
Yeah.
I mean, that's where the swing really, well, the beat comes from 1 and 3.
Right.
You know,
And the swing comes
and
from
this and the dress.
right.
I guess you could say the swing of the where the next 1 and 3 is going to fall is where after your 2 and 4.
After your 2 and
yeah.
4, right? So then the it's the relationship of the 2 and the 4 to
Yeah.
the 1 and 3
Right.
that creates the swing, because if
Yeah, because
there's-
2 and 4.
when guys play
yeah.
rim shots wrong,
Yeah,
it's awful.
it's a terrible.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, your 2 and 4 is where they fall on the beat. That's where you're on top of the beat routine, or you're behind, or you're whatever. I mean, that's where all that happens.
Yeah. I was talking with someone who I think would probably consider himself a student or a disciple of yours, Charlie Brome,
Mm-hmm.
the drummer, and this comes about. You know, we were having some beers late one night in Germany, and I was just wondering. I said, you know, why does it make me feel so good physically when a band is swinging? I mean, what is it about the fact that, you know, a band's playing and it's swinging and it makes you feel good? Now, why should that happen?
Yeah.
It's just a bunch of guys playing music and somebody's playing the drums and the bass. Why is it? And we're talking about this 1 and 3 and the 2 and 4 and the swinging thing.
Yeah.
And he says, well, you know, maybe it had something to do with and he said, this is not an original thought of mine, he said, but it has something to do with the rhythm of creation. I mean, who knows where it comes from, but something about that rhythm
Yeah.
that just makes you smile inside.
Whatever it is, it's something everybody doesn't feel, but a lot of people feel it and they don't know it. They're not aware of it.
Yeah.
You know, that's, but it's something. You know, that's, see, rock and rollers talk about a groove. They're not talking about a groove. They're not talking about swinging. They don't know what swing is. They're talking about getting it, to them, in the groove means it's metronomically correct. That's what it is for them.
Right.
They don't know about that thing called swing, you know, because it doesn't happen in rock music. It doesn't swing. It's because it's straight 8, you know.
Right.
But it happens in funk, which is not straight 8.
No, no.
Funk
it's
is
12/8.
a 12/8.
Right.
It's a shuffle.
Yeah.
It's a big difference. And that's what it's all about. And when it's right, there's just nothing like it. And I think it's a better feeling than any. It's a sexual feeling, but I think it's better than sex.
Because it can last longer.
Well, it does. It can, yeah. But there's just something about it that it just. It just. Yeah, and it covers your whole. You know, it covers everything. You know, it's
Yeah.
Also, it's created by a group,
Right.
which makes it even more difficult.
Right.
You know. So I think the impact is stronger. But you can't beat. That's why I had such a ball New Year's Eve, and playing with you at the Cat Club. You know,
Right.
when we get the people when we hit that right groove.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
it's very important. I mean, watching the heads bounce. You can see it. You can feel it. You know when it's happening. When it ain't, it ain't. You know.
Yeah. I don't mean a thing.
No.
Going on 2 minutes after the hour of 8 o'clock. That's Mel Lewis you're listening to. This is WKCR FM New York, 89.9 on your FM dial. Lauren Schoenberg here, and a pleasure to be co-hosting these shows with Mel on the history of jazz drums. Right now we're going to continue. There were a bunch of drummers in New York in the 1920s who didn't even have as much repute as someone like Kaiser Marshall, who was known nationally throughout his recordings with the Fletcher Henderson Band. And there were two bands around New York in the late 1920s that attained legendary status. One was the band of Charlie Johnson, who had a band at Small's Paradise, in which Benny Carter made his first recordings. And the drummer in that band was someone by the name of George Stafford. And George Stafford is on a handful of recordings. However, we're going to pass over George Stafford, but not without mentioning him, and go to the drummer in the other band that was, along with the Ellington Band and the Fletcher Henderson Band, one of the top four bands in New York in the late 1920s, early 30s, and that was Louis Russell's band. Louis Russell, of course, eventually had the band that backed up Louis Armstrong throughout the mid-1930s into the early 1940s, when he eventually left the band. And the drummer in his band was a gentleman who came from a large musical family in New Orleans, who's among our mutual friend Vernel Fournier, studied with I believe with this gentleman, talking about Paul Barberin.
Uh-huh.
And he was a great New Orleans drummer, and he was the drummer in the Louis Russell Band, and I think his name should be mentioned, and we should listen to him on one item. Unfortunately, the recording was not done that great to begin with in terms of fidelity, and on top of that, the transfer that we took it from, the LP, unfortunately is not the best, but nonetheless you'll hear how swinging the band is. This is Louis Russell's band, September 1930. The solos are by Red Allen, J.C. Higginbottom, Greeley Walton on the tenor, and Albert Nicholas on the clarinet. This is Panama. It's really swinging. Let's focus in on the drummer Paul Barberin. was really swinging. Boy, it really brought back memories of a few years later, Duke Ellington's Stompy Jones there, especially those out
Exactly.
choruses with the
Yeah, that's the blues
yeah
or whatever it is.
yeah 16 bar choruses.
That was fun.
Yeah,
It swung all the way, and he just got onto his snare drum, his press rolls, and a few little. See, again, once you hit a groove and you stay there.
right.
You know, he didn't do much except swing, and that's all he had to do.
Yeah.
But I had heard a lot about him when I was a kid.
Really?
Oh yeah. Well, he used to get written up with the New Orleans people, Paul Barber and people like him and Pops Foster and all that. Because see, in the '30s, these were the guys you were hearing of. These were the jazz men you were hearing about. Red Allen, and Louis and all the small. They were the small group players.
Right. During the big
And-
band era.
Right. And you either heard about big bands or them. And you were talking about Moldy Figs, Dixieland, and because the swing thing was evolving out of the big bands. Yeah.
Yeah. And that was really those last courses were romping. I mean, I don't
Yeah.
know, what more could you want? I mean, it's romping.
Even Duke's band. Let's face it. In the early days of Duke, I mean, a lot of that stuff was just jamming, and it was Dixieland, really.
Yeah.
But it was, and then all of a sudden, it was his ballads and things in his little compositions, that were so simple and so different, and little voices. But they were small bands. The band wasn't that big. And like when they get into the hot stuff, it started jamming.
Well,
And that's why things like Stompy Jones and all that would come off so good. Nothing but a big jam session, everybody just bouncing away.
yeah, with a little
That's
bit.
what this was. And this cat could play,
Yeah. I'll have to dig up and find some better Paul Barberin records. I'm sure there are some
there's
from
gotta
later
be,
on
yeah,
where he was
but
better
I mean, but that's
recorded.
a good one.
Well, he's on Louis' record of I think Jubilee, and some of
Mhm.
those well-known big band
Yeah.
records that are really swinging.
Yeah.
That's all Paul Barberin, and certainly wanted to call his name on this history of the great jazz drummers. Some well-known, some obscure, some innovators, some just great drummers.
Yeah,
which is
look,
no-
see, we're not
no
going to
thing.
sit and break everyone. We're not going to break them down.
Right.
We're just acknowledging
That's right.
what they did. I mean, that they existed and that they did some marvelous things. They contributed to the art form and they were some of the. And it's just make sure that they don't just disappear.
This next one is someone who is not familiar to many people except fans of certain kind of music from a certain era. His name was Stan King. And Stan King was a top studio man in New York in the 20s and early 30s. And supposedly, I mean, I know he's long gone, but I've heard on good authority that he was a fall-down drunk. He was one of the, and there were a lot of those in those days, I guess.
Yeah, I
A
suppose
real heavy drinker. And the amazing thing was how many record dates he got with this awful reputation he had for being a drunkard. I don't mean to badmouth the man on the air, but this was a fact. And the fact that people continued to use him, the Dorsey brothers,
And he must have played awfully good.
were nuts about him. And let's hear Stan King, a New York studio musician who was a real swinger. It's called The Man from the South with a Big Cigar in His Mouth. It's Rube Bloom and his Bayou Boys. Rube Bloom plays piano and sings. And the band includes Benny Goodman, clarinet, Tommy Dorsey, trombone, Manny Klein, trumpet, someone you probably work with.
Oh yeah, I know Manny.
Adrian Rollini on the bass sax, Rube Bloom on the piano, Eddie Lang on the guitar, Roy Evans and Rube Bloom on the vocals, the men from the South, and again we're going to focus on the drums of Stan King.
What's that cheering all about? Why do all those people shout? Hear them bing bing banging on those pails. It can't be Hoover, can't be Ford. Everybody's running toward. Must be Lindbergh or the Prince of Wales. Is that him passing by? Say, folks, I know
I'm gonna tell you about that great big man from the South. He was a great big man from the South. He used to have a big cigar in his mouth. Of course, I knew that he was from the South.
Pretty fancy stuff for 1930.
Yeah, it's a
Nice
it's,
little ending there.
But I mean, you could hear how clean he played. You know, so he was definitely a studio man, playing on his Ludwig Black Beauty snare drum. I could tell that.
Really?
Sure, that was a studio drum. That was one of those. I had a couple of those too, that I used for studio work. You know, they recorded beautifully. You know, a very dry sound.
That's what I meant to ask you. What do you mean by a studio drum? I mean, what's
A drum that's just made for recording. Yeah.
well, what's the difference between a drum that's made for recording and playing?
Well, a jazz drum is a drum that's funkier. It's got like the drums I use for playing jazz are not what you'd use on a Barbra Streisand recording session with
Why not?
strings.
Why not?
Because in order to get the sound I want on that drum, because I'm going to play the same way on either drum.
Right.
The jazz drum is going to have this funny ring to it.
By ring, you mean?
It's going to sound like me, and it's going to have a ring to it, you know, a bong, you know,
Right.
because it's recorded, you know. Now, so I would use what we call a dry drum, which would be a drum I don't have to put tape on it, but I can play brushes or sticks with it, and it'll come out sounding like that, real clean,
Right.
you know. And the engineer won't scream; he'll think, "Wow, that sounds beautiful." When you get a real nice sound.
Yeah.
See, whereas like the drums like Baby Dodds used before with his, see that's what the wires with the snares are loose on it, and it's a jazz sound.
Right.
It's different.
We're talking with Mel Lewis. We just heard a rare recording, The Man from the South from 1930, Stan King on drums. Again, to recap, we're here doing the history of jazz drums on 3 Wednesdays, today, next Wednesday, and the Wednesday after that. We've already heard from Baby Dodd, Zutty Singleton, Ben Pollack, Kaiser Marshall, Paul Barbarin, and Stan King. It's 8:16, and we're going to start to get into a very fascinating figure, a gentleman who didn't make it past about 30-some-odd years old, who was very influential, Buddy Rich and Gene Krupa and every great drummer, Big Sid Catlett and Max Roach all talk about this guy, Chick Webb. And the amazing thing about Chick Webb was that he was a hunchback. He was
deformed.
He was about 4 feet high
he
or
was very
something.
small, like a dwarf.
Yeah.
I guess you'd say.
A dwarf, yeah.
And but he was, and they worried about him all the time. I mean, his friends and all that, you know, about him falling apart because he wondered where all this strength came from, all this energy.
Must have been shocking. I mean, it's one thing, you know, for folks like myself who, and I guess you didn't see Chick Webb, I wouldn't think, or did you?
I never saw him in
You know,
person.
for people who
no.
only know him from records, and then to juxtapose that with the reality of the fact that this is a dwarf.
There was some wonderful pictures of him. The first time I saw a picture of him was on the, he was on the cover. He was the cover of the Gretsch drum catalog.
Really?
Oh yeah. And he was their top man. Gretsch Drum Company featured him as their top man,
Really?
and he was on the cover. And there he was with his hunchback and with the whole thing, taken behind a beautiful set of Gretsch drums that were custom made for him. I mean, totally customized. You know,
Yeah.
but they had to be. They had to be set up special.
And although, you know, the
With the gooseneck, he had these big gooseneck holders and all that.
yeah,
Yeah, it was all Gretsch made that for him.
And he must have had a specially designed bass drum pedal.
Everything was designed for him. It was the whole set, for how he could sit, and the set was in a was what these guys call rack. Today they have these rack drums.
Right.
They set the drums up on racks. He had that. He had a rack set up. I mean, now we're talking, again,
Early
folks,
30s.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're way behind.
Well, let's go to Chick Webb. We have a number of Chick Webb recordings to play right now. To kind of get into Chick Webb, and we'll probably pick up with Chick Webb when we continue a week from tonight. We'll hear the original recording of Don't Be That Way, so when you see the Benny Goodman story or reading a book somewhere that this tune was written for Benny Goodman's Carnegie Hall concert just for that night and all that kind of stuff, it wasn't true. It was written by Edgar Sampson, who was the lead alto in Chick Webb's band and an arranger, and this is the original version of Don't Be That Way. You might also be very surprised by the tempo on this. Interesting.
Yeah, first of all, he played brushes all the way on that, and that meant some pretty hard hitting. He had to hit those cymbals hard, and
Yeah.
and his little solo at the end, where you could really hear he was playing brushes then. But I was trying to figure out at first. I thought it doesn't sound like press rolls. I didn't hear any cymbals except when he'd crash, and that means he was really hitting them. And but it was swinging all the way. It had a good balance on the rhythm section all the way.
Yeah.
And but why shouldn't he play brushes on that?
Why not?
Yeah.
That's another thing. Something that if you observe Mel Lewis playing in a big band, you'll find out is that, and what he has in common with all the great drummers we're listening to, is that just drums in a big band doesn't always mean ride cymbal with sticks. Loud. I mean, you can play the hi-hats, you can play brushes, you can play stick and a brush, you can do any number of things. And certainly for Chick Webb to play brushes on a up-tempo swinger, a tune of solo, I mean, that
Why
was
not?
pretty unheard of in those days. And, maybe that's one reason. Did you talk about Chick Webb with other drummers like Buddy and all those guys?
Oh, yeah.
What did they say
Yeah.
about,
Well,
what
he-
kind of things did you hear about him?
Well, I know that Gene and Buddy Let's see. Buddy once said something. Well, I mean, I remember Buddy once saying that he felt that Gene got everything he did. That he actually, he's came out of Chick, and I don't agree with that totally.
No.
But there's a lot. But there was definitely a lot of Chick Webb in Gene Krupa. Definitely. The style. The style of playing. I mean, the showmanship
Right.
definitely came. Gene must have spent a lot of time going to see Chick at the Savoy
Savoy.
Ballroom because I could see that just from the pictures. Now, like I told you, I never saw Chick in person, but I saw enough pictures of him, and then I saw Gene enough to know that he might have been emulating him pretty much, and that was the man he dug more than anybody.
Yeah.
The solos, there's certain solos, like stuff like we'll hear like from Liza and things like that, where you will hear Gene on later records later on, even long after the Goodman stuff, because Gene didn't play that many drum solos on Goodman
No.
records, except for Sing Sing Sing,
Right.
and that was basically that was a tom-tom solo.
Right.
But where Gene got into his 16 bar and 16 bar solos and things like that, which is what Chick did on a few records.
Yeah.
You hear it. So I would say, in fact, Gene was more into Chick than he was than he was Baby Dodds, because he wasn't playing all that woodblock cowbell
Right.
stuff. So I would say he was more out of Chick, and Buddy said that too. But I think Buddy also came out of Chick because Buddy came out of Gene. But Buddy just did what Gene did twice as fast.
Right.
I mean, that's what it boils down to. As far as ideas were concerned, I think they were all listening to Chick Webb. I think Chick was the modern drummer of the time,
Right.
and he was
Before
in a
Joe
good
and all those
and he
guys.
was in a good position because he was playing. He had a great band playing at the ballroom in New York, and everybody went up there. And in those days, it was possible to go up there any day of the week, and get out there and enjoy the band. There's no drinking was allowed in the Savoy Ballroom.
I didn't know that.
No, you had to be sober to even get in. So everything was pure.
Yeah, and with those
So-
bands, man. Who
and then the adventure of bands taking on the Chick Webb band, which was the house band. It must have been, like everybody was trying to do they all did their best, and nobody really won. They claimed the Ellington band won one night. I don't know. Who knows?
Yeah.
I wasn't there.
Basie band, Goodman band, they all battled
But
Chick
so
Webb.
what? As long as they, that was the old idea of the battle of the bands anyway. Was the two bands. I worked at my first gig at the Savoy Ballroom in 1948 was with Lenny Lewis's band, and we played opposite Cat Anderson's band. And now I remember Cat had a good band. We had a great band. It was a good band.
Yeah.
We had Al Killian in our band, and he had Cat Anderson in front of that band. We had Fats Ford too.
Right.
We had all these high note trum. Who knows who was better or what? All I know is that we tried our best to be better,
Right.
and I know they did too. So it was fun,
Right.
and I think that was and I had played other battles of bands with other bands. That was
Right.
the battles of the bands were basically bonus kind of dances
Right.
for people. But it was true that when a band got on a stage opposite another band, everybody really bore down.
Oh yeah.
And the Chick Webb band had this going on for them all the time. So he had to be on top of his game all the time, and every drummer that came in there,
yeah.
like saying, "Oh my God, I got to battle Chick Webb."
And of course, Chick Webb not only having a great band and being a great drummer, then when Ella Fitzgerald joined the band and became a hit, he really had it all. I think he had a very, very
but
successful
again,
band.
Yeah, but see now, there you go again. The band was not a hit until she joined,
Right.
and she was a nobody. I mean, nobody ever heard of her.
No.
But her presence. Same thing happened with the Basie band. The Basie band was scuffling like hell until Joe Williams joined it.
I mean the second
The
bass.
well, yeah, but the first band with Rushing, I mean, they worked themselves down to nothing,
Right.
to where they had to break up.
Right.
People didn't appreciate that first. That first band was a real jazz outfit,
Right.
playing the real thing. And the band didn't make it. In 1948, it was over.
Yeah.
When they got back together again and And back in the 50s, they came back as a more commercial kind of a band.
Less solos,
Bigger,
more ensemble.
less solos,
Right.
more ensemble, and Joe Williams. And of course, the people ate up Joe Williams.
Right.
I mean, why not? I mean, he's great. But I mean, I'm saying, and the same thing with Chick Webb, you know, and the same. And listen, Stan Ken wouldn't have had anything without June Christie, and it's been proven,
Yeah.
you know, that. Woody's hits were vocals that he sang,
Right.
and Francis Wayne,
right.
you know,
Mary Ann McCall.
which
right.
proves to me that this world has never really accepted, including and Ellington. It was his Ellington's pop music, his
Right.
songs that made it for him. His music his compositions made it for us, the musicians. We know how great he was, but the people, man, when you say Duke Ellington, they think of Satin Doll.
Oh yeah, sure.
They don't think of a sophisticated lady,
Yeah.
you know, and we know that.
Yeah.
And let's face it, nobody, jazz, as we would like to have had it make it, never really did ever make it. You know,
No.
it's still struggling, and it always will, I guess.
Yeah.
You know, unless you get the right singer.
It's 8:29. We're talking with Mel Lewis. You mentioned Mel Lewis has a singer in his band, Renee
yeah,
Manning.
I got a nice singer,
Yeah.
Renee
Yeah. And
Manning.
of course, that's every Monday night down at the Village Vanguard, as everyone knows, going into their 24th year. Right now, let's hear a couple more recordings by Chick Webb before we split.
Okay.
And then we're going to hear a nice, healthy dose of Mel Lewis's jazz orchestra and some old and new Mel Lewis recordings. Let's go with one more by Chick Webb. This is Go Harlem. He has a nice little solo on this.
and Liza. Take it, Chick.
What do you have to say to that?
Well, that's a little considerably faster than the recording,
Yeah.
the regular recording of it, and it almost got away there a few times. It was a little it was a little too bright.
Yeah.
But see, Chick was the first drum soloist. I mean, he was the first cat to feature the drums. I mean, where people got excited watching, you know.
Right.
But the drag, of course, Gene Krupa is the one who brought it to fruition. I mean, because and Gene got it from him, and was able to do it in Benny's band, although not as much as he was able to do it in his own band later on.
Right.
So that's actually where it went. And then, of course, during that period, Buddy, who was a sideman in Tommy Dorsey's band, was couldn't wait for his chance to get his own band together so he could do it. But it was Chick who they wanted to be him.
Right.
And because they had books, his book was built around his drumming, and so were theirs.
That's very interesting. So that
You know.
might have been his outstanding influence.
Yeah. The only thing I have to give Krupa more credit is that Krupa really had a fine musical band. That really, that when he featured himself, you knew he was going to be featured. But in between that, he played for the people, and he had a good modern band that played good music.
Yeah.
For dancing and for listening, and he featured his guys. You know, he didn't hog it, and he didn't play. There was, and you know, he gave you the drum solo when he was ready, when he felt like it.
Right.
But you didn't get one on every tune.
Right.
Whereas with Chick, you did. You got a lot of it. You know, but how can you fault the man? I mean, he had he had what he had, and he knew he wasn't going to be here a long time, and he knew he had something special, and he wanted to be sure that it got out.
Yeah.
Before he was gone.
Yeah.
I mean, I mean, we all, they know, everybody knows in the write-up, the stories, that he knew he was,
Oh yeah.
you know. So he said, well, I got what I have to give, and I'm going to give it. And he
Yeah.
did.
Yeah.
And he did get everybody else started, because he gave ideas out, you know.
Mel Lewis is giving a lot of ideas out tonight. We're going to be back next week with him. Lauren Schoenberg here. It's 8:39, and Mel is at the Fortune Garden tonight, has to make a gig with Steve Kuhn and Ron Carter. And I'm headed down to the Red Blazer to work with Stan Rubin's band. And that gig is coming up, so we're both going to get out of here and get to the gig. We'll be back next Wednesday night at 6 p.m. for 3 hours of more of the history of jazz drumming. And we're going to pick up with Chick Webb. We're not done with him. We're going to hear some more great Chick Webb recordings and talk a lot more about Chick Webb. And we'll get into Big Sid and Gene and Buddy and Shadow and Sonny Greer and the rest of them. It's going to be a fascinating show. Next Wednesday night, please tell your friends. But don't turn off the radio right now because we still have some great music for you. We're going to go from an early Mel recording to a recent Mel recording inside the parameters of his career.
Okay.
The first one is from the Mode LP, the Mel Lewis 6. Could you introduce the band for us?
Well, let's see. What side are we going to play?
Brookside.
Brookside. All right. This Brookside is these are through a few Bob Brookmeyer arrangements and compositions. Brookside is by Bob Brookmeyer. You Took Advantage of Me is an arrangement by Bob, and then the thing called Zigzag, which is a composition by Bob. And we will be featuring people such as Charlie Mariano on alto and tenor, Bill Holman on tenor and baritone, Jack Sheldon on trumpet, Marty Page on piano, and Buddy Clark on bass. Recorded back in June of 1957.
The Mel Lewis Sextet.
The Mel Lewis Sextet on Mode Records.
And then we'll, after that, if there's any time left before 9 o'clock, we'll jump to the Mel Lewis Orchestra, 20 years at the Village Vanguard, and hear Richie DeRose's beautiful arrangement of Dearly Beloved, featuring Gary Simoleon on the baritone sax.
Right.
Mel, thanks. I'll see you next
Okay,
Wednesday.
Lauren. Yeah, I'm looking forward to next Wednesday.
Okay, and we'll see you all next Wednesday, 6 p.m. Mark it on your calendars, The History of Jazz Drumming, Part 2. I'll be back next Tuesday at noon with Rich Conady on Tuesday afternoons Out to Lunch. Stay tuned for more Mel Lewis Radio.